to Mark Maron about it a little bit later, and I said, because I know he does that, right? On his podcast, WTF. And I said, Mark, I really feel like doing stories just between me and the Risk audience with that microphone in my little booth, I'm able to get a little bit more raw and intimate than I usually am in front of a big audience live. And he said, that's awesome. He said, keep doing that, because what you'll find is that the more you do that, the more that comfortability with being intimate and raw will seep into what you're doing in front of live audiences too. So that was kind of I love the fact that we attempt to record stories in different ways. The third way we've tried to record stories before, which is a little bit trickier just because you have to get people's permission to do it, is recording someone telling a story to a couple of friends while they're smoking out of a bong or drinking beers together. You know what I mean? So, and the one time we did it, you can literally hear the bong. But what's cool about that style of recording is it's almost like documentary. You know what I mean? But what's cool about it is you get the specific flavor there of a person literally telling a story to just a couple of friends and getting their reactions. That's when they're literally like, "Wait, what happened?" That kind of thing. So we keep exploring different formats for how to get stories, recorded.
Are the podcasts live, or are they just pre-recorded and you post them?
The podcasts are all pre-recorded. We've never done a live one, like streams, broadcast live. But we do have several episodes that are cut together in such a way that it really has the feel of an entire live Risk show. Like we just did Live from Los Angeles a couple weeks ago, and that's, we trimmed it, but it gives you a very good feel for what an entire live show in LA is like. And we did the same thing with Portland. My gosh, the comedy festival in Portland is so awesome. And I hope it stays that way for a little while, because the reason it's so awesome is because industry isn't there. So everyone is just there to party and try new stuff in front of huge, totally receptive audiences. So that was a blast.
Now, do you find it, obviously it's different, but do you prefer to do the podcast, where it's just you with your microphone, or do you like having the live show to, get the feedback immediately?
Oh, for me personally, it's weird. I mean, I almost hate to admit it publicly, but actually I am a bigger fan of working on the podcast and working alone in my booth and working with some sort of archetypical audience that I'm talking to. I totally love doing live shows because there's that energy there, and it's interesting though. I'm starting to do labs in New York City with well-established storytellers and comedians, because I really feel like you don't get enough feedback after a live performance. So I've just written to a bunch of people in town saying, hey, let's have an invite only. Comedians get together, tell stories, and give each other really detailed notes, the way you probably wouldn't after a comedy show and everyone's sitting around having a beer, when you're just going to be like, hey, that was great, dude. You know what I mean? So I love, what I love most is working by myself on the podcast in my booth and working in workshop sorts of settings like I do with my classes, because there you have much more of a conversation going, and of course when I work on stuff in my booth, I do a lot of conversing with my editor. Does this make sense? Am I going overboard here? That sort of thing. So yeah, I like the idea. The one thing that I miss about telling stories live, and maybe it's something I could play with, maybe I could literally start asking the audience questions in the middle of my stories. Tom Shalhoub does that sometimes. he'll take audience, he'll really interact quite a lot with the audience while telling a story. But yeah, it's fascinating to me that doing live shows is not my favorite part. But I keep doing it because, it's in my blood, and because there's such an energy when people tell stories that way. There's just something, it just brings some sort of energy out of people when they're sharing in front of a bunch of people.
And all of this is very much a departure from the sketch comedy you did in the early 90s on MTV. How did you just transition? You just were like, let me try doing this and that's it? Do you miss the sketch stuff?
A little bit, for sure. What I loved about sketch comedy was being able to act so ridiculous. You know what I mean? We had so much fun just goofing off. And I think sometimes there is a little bit of a catharsis in acting like a character who's completely bonkers. There's a little bit of emotional catharsis that comes out of, just acting completely insane sometimes. Because we've definitely got that rattling inside of us. It's interesting. The storytelling thing also goes back even further into the state's history too. It wasn't just Michael Black saying that to me after that 2008 show, but the state was a very cutthroat group of people. We were. Someone said to me recently, we were 11 egomaniacs. So it was really tough because it was a pecking order, and there was always this need that people felt to be funnier than the next guy in the room, and that sort of thing. And also a lot of roasting, a lot of I'll keep your ego in check by cutting you down a little bit, which is not my style at all. It's the reason I ended up at the bottom of one of the reasons I ended at the bottom of the pecking order all the time, because I was always the nice guy. But so what we started to do was what we called check-ins, emotional check-ins at MTV. We all decided, okay, we are so mean to each other throughout most of the workday that we really should spend a half hour at 10 o'clock in the morning when we come into MTV talking about where we are emotionally, just going around the room saying where we are emotionally. And so, because I was the gay one, I was the one who wasn't out with everyone else the night before. Everyone else was together 24/7. And then I would go off and have my gay adventures, And so in the mornings for check-in, everyone was like, oh, what's Kevin going to say? I was always the one with the crazy story. And they used to always say, oh my gosh, you have to start doing that stuff live. But I was always really afraid to do it live, to do this kind of stuff live, because I've always had this, throughout my entire life, this weird in-the-closet feeling. I was raised in a very, very Catholic, very polite and proper, I was the good boy in the family, and so, and I'm just a nice guy in general, so I've got that part of my personality, and then I've got this Mr. Hyde part of my personality, who is like the debaucherous, kinky, wild man. And so I always thought, oh, well, how do I marry these two things? How do I speak as myself in front of an audience and have them get this strange dichotomy? And after all those years of dragging my feet on it, I finally learned just that. Just talk to people frankly about this side of your personality and that side of your personality. One of the I started doing episodes like Kevin Goes to Kink Camp. One of the reasons that people love those episodes so much is because here's a guy who speaks your language, who's very relatable, and who's going into this scene that might be wildly foreign to you, but your narrator is trustworthy and friendly, even if he's talking about really X-rated stuff.